Thank you all for being here. I'm really, really excited about this. Let me do this. I'm going to be really quick, but I want to get us all on the same page about where solar is in the energy pie, because we've talked around this issue quite a lot. Let's just throw out a few statistics. So on the one hand, solar is still pretty small globally. This is all according to the International Energy Agency. Nobuo Tanaka has been here, a former head of the IEA. Let me just tick off some numbers really, really quickly. Globally, renewable energy, all told, provides about 15% of global energy, about 24% of global electricity. That is up from 13% of global energy and 19% of global electricity 20 years ago. So in 20 years, 2 percentage point increase as a percentage of global energy, 5 percentage point increase as a percentage of electricity. The biggest source of that renewable energy ain't solar. The biggest source of global renewable energy is biomass, burning things like dung and grass. And the biggest source of renewable energy globally is dams. Renewable electricity globally is hydropower. Wind and solar combined, according to the IEA, provide about 2% of global energy and about 5% of global electricity. But solar is expected to get quite big and is growing really fast. So wind and solar, a point Tom has made in other sessions, account for the majority of growth in renewable energy over the past few years. According to the IEA, renewable energy, particularly wind and solar, could represent between up to 29% of global energy and 63% of global electricity. 63% of global electricity by 2040, with solar as likely the major part of that. I'm going to stop with one quote from a data provider called Thomson Reuters, whom you've heard of, which suggests that by 2025, that is 6 years from now, solar could be, quote, the primary source of energy on our planet. 6 years. So we're going to test that hypothesis. I want to do 3 things here. I want to start with you guys telling us about how solar's playing out now. I want to then have you prognosticate how big solar could get, and then I want us to talk about what might thwart that. So let's talk first about what's happening on the ground. And Zhongbao Shen, I want to start with you. Your stock has more than doubled in the last 2 years. Congratulations. And your company is growing quite rapidly. What's happening at your company, and what does that say about solar more broadly?
谢谢主持人。
Thank you very much. In the past several years, solar power has been developing very quickly. Since 2013, it was 3 to 4 gigawatt, but this year it's estimated to be 120 gigawatt. In 6 years' time, it has grown by 4 times, which is quite staggering. The main drivers for the growth are twofold. One-fold is because of the attention of people on environment. The second is because of the plummeting of the cost of solar power. Now we all see that in China, in the last year, in the bidding process, Inner Mongolia had a bidding price of about only 0.26 yuan. And in South Africa and the Middle East, North Africa and South America and India, solar power has become almost the cheapest. With the average cost of around 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So this means solar power has a big potential, or it's very valuable in supporting the local economic development. And for the poverty alleviation, solar power is especially important. Thank you. 谢谢你.
When we were chatting that you've sort of done a back-of-the-napkin map of where in the world solar is in the money, and where, that is to say, without subsidy, and where in the world solar is not. And so just share that map for people sketching in the sky.
If you all imagine the planet, we have a band around the equator in which solar is now the cheapest source of new energy, and that band goes up to Spain, roughly in Europe. That is on the grid. If we calculate rooftop solar, that is competing with what you pay for the electricity as a private customer, you are competitive with solar all up until mid-Norway.
And Tom and Eric, do you both agree with that?
Yes.
More than back of the envelope, yes.
Yeah, so so you've actually run the numbers with more rigor.
Yeah, very much so, because we're in the transition from subsidized to non-subsidized, and the economics has been described are irrefutable. And so more and more markets are becoming scaled and therefore cost-effective, and therefore crossing the threshold of being non-subsidized, most economic.
Okay, so I hear sort of the commentary of Tsai Jin-yong in my ear as we're having this conversation, who I've heard in several sessions urge us not to get too carried away on solar because of the requirement for baseload power, which for the non-wonks in the room means power that can be flicked on and stay on rather than be subject to the whims of Mother Nature. I have a suspicion that those of you sitting up here are going to argue that actually that's yesterday's argument, but I don't want to prejudge. So Eric, you're smiling. Why don't you talk?
As this topic is very debatable, but it depends on different territory. In China, there's some challenge for the load because China very much has 3 power companies, right? China State Grid, China Southern Grid, and West in Mongolia. So China State Grid very much, they did their capex, they want to recover their capex, so it's a challenge. But if you look at it,
wait, they want to cover their capex, so what's a challenge?
Challenge because they don't allow the penetration of the renewable energy because that's going to be provide a challenge for the baseload adjustment.
Because they've got sunk assets in fossil fuel plants.
And today, as of today, actually the thermal power has assumed the role of baseload or frequency.
But is it your sense, is it the sense of all of you that with the notion of integrating different kinds of renewables and energy, that actually that can start to look like a baseload power plant?
Yeah, that's for China. But if you look at the United States, they have over 800 regional power network. Okay, so each power network, they have its own flexibility in terms of design, capex, and baseload. And it does allow the grid flexibility for the renewable energy penetration. So different country, different territory, different power systems is the attitude that they allow you to penetrate is also different.
Tom, I see you leaning forward in your chair.
Well, a couple things. You do need baseload, but we already have it.
But what?
We already have it. So in the developed world, baseload already exists, and today it might be 80%. In the future, it's going to be a much smaller percentage. So there's a reason why the ecosystem of baseload, find me a company in that ecosystem that isn't doing renewables. So the answer to your question is yes, but it already exists. And so the new generation is renewables, and you see the companies in baseload moving.
So just to be clear, your point is that yes, the world needs, let's not use the wonky terms, so yes, the world needs dependable 24/7 power, but that there's enough of that already built that runs on fossil fuels that it is fine for the world's grids for all of the new stuff to be renewables.
Yes, and clearly that's the case in the developed world, so to speak, and is largely the case in the developed world.
Okay, so I apologize, I'm going to come to you, Christian, but I want to ask you a different question because we have so much to talk about. We're going to jump around here. So you guys are disrupting the hell out of the global industry. There are a lot of people who really don't like you. And I want you to talk about that. There are established companies, certainly in the utility industry, but not just in the utility industry. In the automotive industry, because to the extent that you're enabling electric cars, you're no good, and on and on. And I just want to, as you sit in your office in Norway, what does that look like, the barbarians at the gates?
Norway is in the middle of all this because we are a big oil and gas producer, but at the same time we are also a country where all the electricity, 99.5%, is produced by renewable energy. Thanks.
Hydro.
Mainly hydro.
Okay, but still a sort of establishment industry, right? Different from the kind you're peddling or increasing.
So our company, Statkraft, we have developed from that hydropower base into a renewable company in hydro, wind and solar. So we are a part of what you can say is changing the industry on the wind and solar side. And We believe this is revolutionary. I think solar will play the same role in our industry as the semiconductor did in the communications industry. It will be everywhere and it will revolutionize.
But I just want to ask, and Zhongbao, Eric, jump in here if you'd like. What does it look like in your world every day? Do you feel like you're being squeezed by the people who don't want you to succeed, or is that too hyperbolic and in fact the road is open for you?
We are very excited about what we are doing every day for the solar, because we see this is only a few industries that have clearly 20 to 30% growth, the demand side.
Per annum.
Per annum, right? I've been in this industry for the last 10 years. If you look at 10 years ago, from 5 gigawatt installation globally until this year, probably you can reach 115 installation. That's why the people in this industry or people outside in the industry, they're very excited about the potential growth. We even can reach 500 gigawatt installation by 2025. So it's really amazing industry. So we are very excited. There's no regret for me to join this industry.
But it's interesting because there's been a sort of narrative in here for the past couple of days that the industries represented here are somehow having to fight a wall of opposition from the old guard. I'm sure I'm overemphasizing it, but I think that's basically what the notion is. And I don't hear that from you all. I don't hear the sense that you feel like you're being thwarted. Am I understanding that correctly?
I don't think this is a fight, like you call it. It's more that the new technology is coming in. We have to find our way into the market, but we are not. We are finding open doors, not closed doors, when we propose things.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why it's called resistance to change, and so you do get soundbite, non-data-driven comments, and that one form of resistance to change. Policy is another area where, interestingly, 10 years ago, the lament about sun power or about solar was, oh, you're subsidized. Now solar is largely unsubsidized, and those industries that we're saying that are looking for subsidies to thwart the growth or to compete. There are subtle resistance to change, but the genie's out of the bottle, the horse out of the gate. This game is over. The economics are so compelling.
This game is over.
Yeah, the economics are so compelling. Our customers want renewable energy. So if you want something that's better economics, it's going to happen.
All right, so I want to stop, and Zhongbao, we'll come to you in a moment, but I heard a couple of giggles. So I want to really actually engage this question here in the audience of whether the game indeed is over. And so we have a couple of mic runners. Raise your hand if you'd like to jump in at some point in this conversation. And if you could just watch if hands go up. Zhongbao, I want to come to you and I want to ask a question that we've talked about in many of these sessions with regard to solar, and that is the trade fight between the United States and China, and more broadly between European nations as well as China. I just want to understand, I mean, each of you is running a global business, and we'll come to the others of you in a moment too. To what extent are the tariffs, and again, just to review, the United States imposed tariffs on Chinese-made solar panels. China is the world's largest maker of solar panels. Solar panels are a global supply chain. Many of those Chinese solar panels have been exported to other places, including Europe and the United States. That's basically the case for the three gentlemen up here who manufacture solar panels for a living, other than Christian, who buys them to put on his projects. Zhongbao, how is this whole trade fight affecting your business? It is affecting it, I know. How?
首先呢，我们非常反对贸易战。
Well, of course, very much resistant to the trade war. Sino-U.S. trade war, actually before it, 2012, U.S. was already, having this anti-dumping, anti-monopoly, charges against us, and actually for us, the U.S. is threatening more tariffs on our products, which means there will be a much higher cost for us to import into U.S. or actually close the door to the U.S. market. And we believe this will also play a negative impact on the renewable energy industry of the United States. It could have developed much faster. But if the tariff is higher, then the U.S. market won't have access to much cheaper, solar power.
Really interesting, and I think there's another bit of this because we chatted before, and that is you've actually shifted some of your manufacturing offshore out of China to Malaysia because of the tariffs, so that what you're producing in China would have been subject to the tariffs. Now you shift the production to Malaysia, and it's therefore no longer subject to the tariffs, and you can export that tariff-free to the United States.
During Trump administration, and actually the first measure it has taken is to take so-called 201 on all the photovoltaic business. So that's worldwide.
Law, the 201 refers to a provision of the law. Please, go ahead.
Yeah. Worldwide, except for the United States, only solar panels will be highly tariffed. So if it is going to be imported into U.S., well, Malaysia's tariff is much lower. That's why we have moved our facility to Malaysia, so that we could continue to serve our U.S. customers.
I've heard a lot of discussion in here and in the hallways about the way that this tariff fight is affecting countries, and here you've heard one specific example, right? There are people who used to be working in Chinese factories who are now working in Malaysian factories making Zhongbashen's LONGi solar panels. So Eric, let's go to you, and I just want to ask a similar question in the GCL world. And you have a quite interesting business because you manufacture solar panels, but you also manufacture massive volumes of something called polysilicon, which is a raw material used in solar panels. And I won't go too deep into this, but both of those things in their own separate ways have been footballs in this geopolitical trade fight. And it seems to me that actually GCL has benefited on the poly side and been hurt on the panel side. So just walk us through this.
So it's neutral for the GCL. Actually, the trade war didn't affect GCL much, right? If you look at the landscape of the global solar panel, the manufacturing, as in Southeast Asia, they have almost reached 18 gigawatt by end of this year. So it's perfect for the United States, which is roughly the same size. And also those manufacturers in Southeast Asia, they very benefit from the supply chain integration within China, within mainland China. So it's a little bit cost on the upside, but actually it's very competitive.
So you're able to continue your exports to China just by shift, as Zhongbashen is doing, moving outside of China.
That's one of the. We don't have trade war. We still want to move part of the outside China to repositioning what we call global manufacturing footprint to benefit to the customer, because this is a truly global demand. A global customer like Southeast Asia, their demand is increasing high as well, even in India and Africa. So
it's not hurting you?
No.
Okay, and Christian, are you having to pay more for the stuff?
Yeah, I think
you could just be clear, you're in Europe and there are tariffs.
We are not in the US and we are not in China. So with assets, we will open an office in China next year, and we have an office in the US for trading. But we are not on the asset side. But I think the trade war is not good at all for neither for the renewable business nor for mankind as such. And what we see in our industry is we are in the midst of two mega trends. One is electrification, electricity into mobility, buses, cars, plus ships. Like in Norway, we now have 100 electric passengers ships under construction. So, more than half of all the new cars sold in Norway were electric in the first 6 months. Only 7 years ago, we had 3% of car sales electric. We now have more than 50. This year, electric car sales in China is 3%. So we will expect to see a massive ramp up of sales in China and all other markets of electric cars, and they will be cost competitive without any subsidies in about 5 years' time compared to normal fossil fuel.
Have the tariffs, because Europe has imposed tariffs on Chinese solar panels as well, have those tariffs materially affected your bottom line?
Yes, it has affected, of course, a cost increase in Europe. but it's not as bad as between US and China.
Okay.
So, but it is many places.
We're gonna...
But despite that, there is a trend of electrification and the other trend of having solar and wind coming in and taking a bigger and bigger market share of electricity. Those mega trends, they are still here despite the trade wars.
We're going to come to Tom in a second, but really quick. Yeah.
Jeff, the fact is the trade war didn't slow down the global demand, but not many people really understand the reasons. If you understand the project development, the cycle is 24 to 36 months, which means when you start to develop the project, you already factoring your module price at the current price, right? But with module price or systems coming down, then you add the tariff. It's going to not affect your total return.
Because the prices are coming down for reasons of technology and scale more than they are going up because of
when you are ready to commission into installation, you add a tariff, which is the offset, because it's a long cycle for the project development.
So this is, please go ahead.
Yeah, so that's the economic logic. That's why you see globally, even with the trade war in US, Europe, they didn't slow down installation. Right? If you develop a project, you factor the price of today. But if you add a tariff, when in 3 years you are ready to install, your module price comes down, your system price comes down.
So I just want to, this is really interesting because had we been here 5 years ago, I suspect that these gentlemen would have said that policy, a subject we've all been talking about quite a lot, is going to kill this industry or might kill this industry. And what I think you've just heard is that this industry is too big now to be killed by the undulations of policy. So Tom, really quickly, I want to get us away from tariffs, but I just want you to jump in because they've affected your company and your global footprint quite profoundly. So in 10 seconds, I mean, you're based in California, but you do most of your manufacturing outside the United States, most of your manufacturing in Latin America and Southeast Asia, but there's a China component that's become relevant here. So just explain this to us.
So tariffs unequivocally have caused companies to reconfigure their supply chains. And we do have a joint venture in China that we service the rest of the world from. So it's an influence where we choose to serve those markets. Secondly, tariffs have been overwhelmed with scale and costs coming down. So it's important, but it's not the main driver. The main driver is they're overwhelmed with scale and cost. And then as a Silicon Valley company, we need to anticipate what's next. And how do we innovate what's next, which is clearly the integration of storage and software. And so that's what we're focused on.
So we're going to come to that. I just want, is there anyone who wants to ask a question? Okay, so just let's keep watching out for a potential question. So we're going to come to what's next, but before we do, I want you all kind of on the record here about how big you think this train that you're arguing has left the station, how fast it could go, where does the metaphor go from here, I don't know. How big could solar get? I've heard eye-popping numbers from several of you over the last 2 days. So Tom, let's start with you.
Well, when we...
and this is, by the way, not a hope, but an expectation that you'd actually take to your board.
Well, when I started in 2003, the solar market was really big. That's attracted me to it. It was 2 gigawatts. Today it's 120. It's 60 times as big from 2003 to now. And what's really cool is when we plot that and we look at the next 30 years, this looks really small growth. It looks like we've just started. And the real knee of the curve is happening in the next 5 years. So where the action is not the last 13, but the next 15 or 20. And the numbers dwarf. There'll be annual growth rates that are as big as the entire market and not that too far out.
Okay, and I don't want to take a lot of time on this, but does anyone disagree here with what Tom just articulated? Christian?
I don't disagree, but we have scenarios saying that renewable energy will constitute 80% of all electricity on the planet by 2050, and solar will take the biggest share of that. And in global energy, it will be close to 50% of all energy on the planet from renewable energy, again, with solar being the largest.
And how big is solar of that 50%?
Solar is a little less than 50 of the total renewable. It's like 40.
Okay, so I want to come back to the question that Tom teed up. Okay?
Yeah. No,
okay, not okay.
No, from the investment perspective, not from the industry perspective. One of my friends in Wall Street Journal, he told me there's $2 trillion asset in the traditional conventional energy today. Those holders of this $2 trillion US in New York Stock Exchange, they want to convert 10 to 15% every year of their holdings into renewable energy. Okay, 50% of that converting is coming from solar. So that's the driven really behind the scene.
50% of what they want to invest in renewables entirely is they want to invest into solar.
Yeah, every year they want to convert 10, 15% to the renewable.
Yeah, 15.
15. Out of that 15,
half is solar.
Half is solar.
Okay.
That's the really money going through behind it, the solar.
All right, so I want to spend the time we have left, and I'm looking for questions, so I will keep looking for questions if there are any. I want to spend it on the question that Tom raised, which is technology. I will say that I think there's a really interesting lesson from what has happened in solar thus far, which is that the technological development has been not disruptive, but rather incremental. It has been tweaking of a technology that was invented in 1954 at Bell Labs in New Jersey in the United States. What's interesting is that, Christian, you're not a manufacturer, but each of the three of you have chosen different ways to tweak that technology. I don't think we have time to get into the differences in the ways you're tweaking them, but they're very different, and some of you are going to be right, and some of you are going to be wrong, and some of you are going to win, and some of you are going to lose. What I want to do is, and you can challenge me if you want on that, but I want to actually go to the question that Tom raised, which is what the next technological thing is. For solar to get to the point that Tom and Christian, you just articulated, is this simply a matter of continuing to eke out incremental reductions in manufacturing costs, or is this going to require major technological disruptive change? And Zhong Baoshen, let's please start with you.
目前看来我
At this moment, the incremental changes would still be mainstreamed. In the short run, we cannot see disruptive technology advancement because thanks to these incremental changes, the solar panels cost have been driven down dramatically. Our current problems is the public awareness on the potential of the solar and the PV is not very high. You know, when we talk about renewable energy sources, for example, in China, they would talk about wind and hydro, but not mentioning solar, especially with their daily electricity consumption. So if the general public's awareness can be higher and think solar is very important energy mix, it can enjoy better development.
Public awareness. Do all of you agree with the proposition that this is just a matter of continued incremental innovation? Christian, go ahead.
The only difference between what is incremental and what is disruptive is how long time it takes. So what we've seen in communication is that it has gone from paper to digital communication. And it has happened a little bit every year over a period of a few decades. And when we look back, it has been disruptive. That will be the same with solar and wind, taking the lion's share of all electricity in the world.
So, yeah, and Eric, I want you to jump in on this too, but Tom, I think you're talking about something slightly different, which is not just technological change in the thing that we all can picture in our minds as being the solar panel, but actually technological change in the integration of that thing with a bunch of other stuff that makes the whole system cheaper and therefore more competitive with fossil fuels?
Yeah, I think when we think of disruption, we need to think about the entire value chain. There's been great work done by the companies up here, GCL, LONGi, the company we're partnered with, TZS, to scale and get costs down. It's phenomenal.
In the solar panel.
In the solar panel. When we look downstream at the integration of solar with the grid, and of course the intermittency, there's phenomenal innovation happening. And when you think about the integration of storage and the optimization of when you use the energy, and then how do you monetize that energy and allow other people to use it, so you have a two-way grid, trading, aggregation, demand response. When we go from the panel to the actual integration with the grid, there's going to be a phenomenal amount of it.
And just say one more thing about that. So are you actually making investments in some of those sorts of companies?
Yeah, we've basically taken most, not all, most of our investment in bet on the integration of storage with the grid, storage solar in the grid. batteries, and digital to make the whole experience fluid and easier.
So in other words, solar panels, batteries, and software between the two.
Yeah, so when you think of SunPower today, you think, hopefully, technology leader in solar panels. When you think of us in 5 years, you'll think an energy solution provider that leads with solar.
Okay.
I think it will be a completely different company.
So I actually hear oil companies a lot talking about the notion that they're no longer oil companies, they're energy companies. And that's essentially what Tom Werner is now saying about his solar company. So Christian, we'll come to you in a second, but Eric, I want to come to you. And we were talking at breakfast, and you mentioned a really interesting play that you've done where you've replaced a natural gas plant with effectively a big battery that allows solar to start looking like something more like baseload electricity. Just take us inside that deal briefly.
Yeah. As for the technologies, silicon-based is still the prevailing technology for the next decade.
Silicon technology for cells
Silicon
and modules.
for cell and module. But we are seeing more intelligent integration between the solar generation and also we call the backup service. Okay, how you integrate more intelligent. So example we did for the Southern California Edison. They used to have a natural gas backup plant, right? So when this backup plant retired, this happened globally, not just in the US, but in Southern Australia, in everywhere.
Where's this plant located?
This is in Irvine, California.
Irvine, near Los Angeles,
in
California.
Los Angeles, right? So when they get retired, they don't put the gas plant anymore. Instead, they use the technology, use battery-based, which we did for them. The reason is when you use natural gas plant, your faster response is 6 seconds, okay, for interruption. Why interrupt? 6 seconds, back up all the power. But for the battery, with our integration, is 2.5 seconds for the backup. You get back all the power. So you can see the amazing integration between new technology, renewable energy, and also battery, but they cannot do with traditional power or.
So this, if it works at scale economically, starts to answer the question of whether indeed solar can provide power even when the sun's not shining.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I have no doubt today.
You have no doubt that that'll happen.
Solar plus storage, solar wind storage. One project we did for the 4 countries is Djibouti. They don't have power. They don't have the gas plant anymore. It's wind, solar, and storage running 24 hours.
All right. So listen.
For the Djibouti port.
We have a very short time left, and I want to ask each of you to answer one question, and that is effectively what keeps you up at night. What worries you? What could throw a wrench in the movement of the train that you've just said has left the station? Zhang Baoshan.
As I said just now, public awareness hasn't recognized the value of solar. We had more psychological worries than the technical worries.
Awareness doesn't recognize solar. How does that actually affect your business?
Because at this moment, the large-scale deployment of the solar panels, public has a lot of worries, but those worries are not a reality.
Okay. Tom, really quickly. Sorry.
So it's great to be the disintegrator, the disruptor, no doubt about it. And the market's huge and growing super fast. It's not up and to the right, however, and it's not aligned. So policy is inconsistent and creates cycles, and those cycles can be rather punitive. So one of the things that keeps me up at night is the consistency of policy. That affects access to capital that allows you to scale to address this giant market, because capital doesn't like inconsistencies. It likes consistent improving returns. So policy with capital raise. So I'm a huge bull. We're at the right place at the right time, but it's not as if, it's frictionless.
Okay.
Consistency of policy and access to capital.
Christian, 25 seconds.
We will be able to handle the integration of solar and wind by flexible hydro, flexible gas, batteries, and flexible demand. What keeps me up at night is that we are in the midst of a huge climate change, and the question is, are we able to do the change fast enough to move the whole world from a dominantly fossil to a dominantly renewable energy system within a few decades.
Eric?
And it is public acceptance and politicians that will make the difference, not the technology.
Thank you. Eric?
I cannot make my US or European customer happy because I don't have enough capacity. That's happened today.
That's the only thing that keeps you up at night.
That's right.
Make more. Can you make enough? Excellent.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Really interesting conversation. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.